This is Mo with Kitsap County Squatch Watch. Today, we're going to talk about what a Sasquatch is. You've probably heard of Bigfoot if you grew up in North America, or the hairy man, swamp ape, booger, wild man, or Sasquatch. If you grew up in Asia, you may have heard people refer to the Yeren in China, the Mongolian Almas, and forest men in Laos. You may have heard of the abominable snowman or Himalayan yeti, observed across the Himalayas from Nepal to Tibet. In Africa, there is a creature by the name of Kulukamba. These creatures all have different names but are the same animal, with slight variations to their looks and behavior with each geographic location. In the Himalayas, the yeti is described as having brown, gray, or white hair and sharp teeth. According to Tibetan lore, there are three kinds of yeti. The Nyalmo, which has black fur, stands 15 feet tall, and is known as the fiercest. The Chuti or Chuti, which is 8 feet tall and lives between 8,000 and 10,000 feet above sea level. And the Rang Shimbombo, which has reddish-brown fur and stands between 3 and 5 feet tall. Sasquatch, as it's known from California up through British Columbia, is known as a creature that is humanoid and ape-like in appearance. It can range in height from 6 to 15 feet tall. Their footprints can be up to 24 inches long and 8 inches wide. Many witnesses have reported that a foul odor, like something dead or rotten, often accompanies their encounters. This is not the case in every encounter, though. Thick hair that ranges in color covers their bodies. People have seen creatures whose hair is brown, black, white, gray, and red in color. Some believe that Sasquatch is simply an undiscovered primate, possibly descended from Gigantopithecus, an ancient extinct ape, while others believe that it can be another humanoid species that branched away somewhere in the evolutionary process. Sasquatch is reported to move surprisingly quickly for its size and is sometimes seen crawling in a spider-like fashion along the ground. Due to its height, it can take large steps and travel great distances in one night. They can easily make their way up steep inclines that would be difficult or impossible for humans to scale. They communicate by vocalizing and knocking on trees. It's important to note that trees pop and creak naturally. The sounds of these wood knocks, however, sound much more forceful and loud than a tree creaking or popping. They're very good at mimicking people and animals. Those who have experienced the mimicry have reported owls calling, but they don't sound like regular owls. Coyotes howling, but the howl sounds off. People have heard their names or their pets' names being called from the woods, often sounding like people who are right there next to them or not home at all. There have been reports of hearing their own voices coming from the woods. It isn't fair to assume that people who have had experiences are all crackpots or on drugs, as many have been accused of being. There are many credible witnesses who hold respectable positions in society. Teachers, professors, police officers, firefighters, park rangers, and government officials. They all have stories but are reluctant to come forward with their true identities for fear of the repercussions to their personal lives. Dr. Grover S. Krantz, who died in 2002, was a professor of physical anthropology at Washington State University. Although he never encountered a Sasquatch himself, he never discounted the possibility of its existence. In fact, he published much on the subject and relied on witness testimony and evidence that they sent to him. He would drive to the locations where these accounts happened and collect evidence, such as footprint casts. People would send him bits of unidentified hair that would often turn out to be black moss, but there were other specimens that couldn't be identified. He believed that the Gigantopithecus species never died. He believed that it went through the same process that humans did: survival, evolution, and migration. In a 1988 Washington Magazine article, Dr. Krantz stated, "Believe me, this is not a distinction I sought. My life would have been much simpler if I had just dismissed Sasquatch out of hand like everyone else does. The problem is, I have examined all of the evidence, considered the variety of possible explanations, and finally, I have reached the conclusion that there is valid scientific basis for this. Sasquatch is not an apparition from the bottom of a whiskey bottle. It is as real as you or I. Some tribes have passed down stories of their ancestors trading with them. Some consider them to be guardians of the forest. Puget Sound tribes told stories of a race of hairy giants that came down from the mountains to steal salmon from their nets and drying racks. Some people I have spoken to have told me that their fishermen would leave piles of fish on the beach as an offering, or a gesture of goodwill, towards the Sasquatch who lived in the area. Natives living in the Blue Mountain region of southwestern Washington state spoke about tall and smelly man-like monsters lurking deep in the mountain forests, communicating with shrill screams and whistles. Possibly one of the earliest written mentions of Sasquatch in Washington is a letter written in April 1840 by Reverend Elkanah Walker, a Protestant missionary to the Spokane natives. Walker's letter goes as follows. I suppose you will bear with me if I trouble you with a little bit of their superstition, which has recently come to my knowledge. They believe in the existence of a race of giants which inhabit a certain mountain to the west of us. The account that they give of these giants will in some measure correspond with the Bible account of this race of beings. They say their track is about 1.5 feet long. They will carry 2 or 3 beams upon their back at once. They frequently come in at night and steal salmon from their nets and eat them raw. If the people are awake, they always know when they're coming very near by their very strong smell, which is most intolerable. It is not uncommon for them to come in the night and give 3 whistles, and then the stones will begin to hit their house. The people believe that they are still troubled with their nocturnal visits. We need prayers of the church at home. This letter sounds like the missionary was worried about these creatures and asking for prayers. It is true that people believe that these creatures also correspond with things mentioned in the Bible. Some people believe that Sasquatch could be the Nephilim mentioned in the Bible, descended from the angels who were intimate with human women. Those human women who were intimate with the angels were cursed to the seas to become sirens. There are others who believe that the Sasquatch are interdimensional beings, their reasoning being that Sasquatch appears and disappears as if from thin air. In many accounts, UFOs and balls of light, called orbs, have been seen within minutes or days of a Sasquatch sighting. Some people claim to have had telepathic conversations with these creatures. Other people are rooted in science and physical evidence, believing that Sasquatch is a flesh and blood creature either related to humans or apes. One thing is for certain. They're elusive and very intelligent. Their intelligence is what has afforded their survival, as humans encroach upon their habitat, disrupting their food sources and shelter. In the forests of the Pacific Northwest, for instance, deer are in abundance. There are elk scattered here and there. Where the trees meet the shore, there are clams and other sea life. The salmon run up the rivers every season. The giant pine trees provide shelter. John Green, a Canadian researcher and journalist who passed away in 2016, collected reports since the 1960s. One area of his record-keeping deals with precipitation. 80% of sightings he noted occurred in areas receiving more than 17 inches of rainfall annually. There are more sightings in western Washington where there is more rainfall than in the dry desert of eastern Washington. One can imagine that it has to do with the sheer amount of resources that the west side of the state offers versus the east side. More cover, more water, and an abundance of food offered by the forest and the sea. Bob Gimlin and Roger Patterson encountered and filmed a female Sasquatch walking in the Bluff Creek area of California. They claimed that she weighed between 350 and 450 pounds, stood maybe 7 feet tall, and was covered in hair everywhere but her nose and cheekbones. They said that from a distance of 90 feet away, she stunk. They'd gone to the area to investigate after British Columbian anthropologist Don Abbott cast footprints from the same region. Patterson died of cancer in 1972, but maintained the authenticity of the footage until his death. Bob Gimlin stepped back from his relation to the film for many years and continued to train horses in eastern Washington, but fame from the film always crept back into his life. He is now in his 90s and still defends the film as the real deal. The Sun newspaper of Bremerton, Washington, reported that on August 11, 2001, forestry manager David Mills reported seeing a Sasquatch in the woods to the Suquamish Police Department. They told him that there had been several reports lately. The article stated that as a forestry manager with the Suquamish tribe, Mr. Mills knew his way around the woods and was positive that he saw a Sasquatch. The other folks who had seen one in the area were reluctant to discuss it. I'm not surprised to find stories of activity coming out of North Kitsap. I spend a great majority of my time there investigating undisclosed areas. I've found the bodies of deer and elk ripped apart. If they'd been dumped by hunters, then the hunters would have at least harvested the animals prior to dumping. Instead, they were found on game trails with their bodies ripped apart, bones and hair scattered down the trail. I've heard it said that the Kitsap Peninsula isn't supposed to have elk. This is incorrect information. We've had reports of elk being seen on the side or in the middle of Highway 3 before. If this sounds unbelievable to you, I would like to inform you that elk are in fact great swimmers. They can swim in lakes, rivers, and open bodies of water like the ocean or the Salish Sea. Their hollow hair and fat help them to remain buoyant in the water and insulate them from hypothermia in cold waters. They've been seen traveling along our beaches and in our forests to get wherever they want. We may not have giant herds of elk like the Olympic Peninsula has, but we most certainly do have elk on the Kitsap Peninsula. Often, I find cedar trees completely stripped of their bark. It isn't every cedar tree in the area either. It's usually just one tree in a sea of trees with all of its bark rubbed and stripped off. Cedar trees have medicine inside of them. I've come to the conclusion that this is why there is usually only one tree with the bark missing. Someone or something is stripping it for its medicine. Sasquatch have been spotted washing and eating roots from trees and plants, as well as eating berries, which would make them omnivorous. I was traveling on a road through some woods in an undisclosed location with a friend of mine. We noticed that an area of ferns on a steep hillside, which had been cut back, now had a large rock sitting on top of them. The rock was not there after the ferns had been cut back a few weeks previously, but there was now a large rock sitting on top of the ferns. It didn't roll from anywhere. It hadn't been there before. It was placed there. A few 100 feet from this rock, there is a tree that has fallen. When a tree falls, the branches that are facing the sky stick up. They don't break off because the branches on that side of the tree are not making impact with anything on the way down. Branches which would have been sticking towards the sky were methodically broken off. Every single branch from the base of the tree to the very tip. This was a fully grown pine tree. I'll include that tree here in the video. A few yards from where this tree lays, there is a tree that looks like it broke off and fell between two other trees. Except the distance and angle it's at don't match up with how a tree would fall or even lodge between other trees. It looks more like it jumped or was lifted and placed. There are lots of places like this in the Pacific Northwest, especially in Washington. Signs of activity include footprints, vocalizations, wood knocking, structures built from fallen trees, logs, and branches. Sometimes you'll notice that in one particular area there will be branches broken on one tree or several. These branches will be piled up at the base of the tree, or they'll be hanging and broken at a 90-degree angle from the tree's trunk. We have lots of foliage and brush and trees to hide in. We also have a lot of power lines, which many people believe that they use as a kind of highway system. When I had my 2009 sighting in Shelton, there were power lines in a creek in close proximity. While you're driving along rural roads or even the highway in some areas, I suggest that you look at the trees and brush on the sides of the road. Are there areas that jump out at you? Do you see any groups of logs or branches leaning against trees on the roadside, making little blinds or markers? How about areas where the trees all seem to be broken in the same direction? Keep an eye out. Tell us what you see at kitsapsquatchwatch@gmail.com and keep an eye on the tree line.